In today's Tough Talk, I talk with Ben Kozlowski. For those that don't know Ben is all things video and content for me. He joined me a year and a half ago after dropping out of college, and now he hangs out with me a lot. And what makes this podcast different is I get pretty vulnerable. I talk about the ups and also downs of this journey that we call life and being an entrepreneur. So please tune in and can't wait to see you soon. All right, so Ben, here we are. A year and a half into this journey?
There it is.
Is that what it is?
About, I think a little less.
4 months?
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Especially the last 3 weeks, oh yeah, the music.
Yeah, let's turn the vibes off.
No, it's been a crazy journey, but especially the last 3 weeks have been kind of even more crazy for me, because I feel like with your focus kind of being more narrowed and you're really cranking on a lot of these projects you got going on, it's kind of left me I wouldn't say time, but the room to reflect on everything in the past year and kind of catch up with where I am now. And it's just kind of allowed me to zoom out and really see my path. And it's been really clear only for, like I said, the last 3 weeks. This seems like a natural evolution for me. And
so what is that? Sure.
So, I mean, okay, so the funny thing is, this is my third go at doing this agency thing. So over the past year, for anybody who doesn't know, if anybody's listening, who knows what we'll do with this, but I've been doing Chris's content, and when I was 15, without my parents knowing, well, until they had to sign off on some stuff, but without my parents knowing in the beginning, I created an LLC, and I started a marketing agency, and that was called Bear Media Agency. And that died out pretty quick because I didn't know what I was doing. And then right before we met, or kind of during the internship phase of our relationship, I was doing that again.
The internship phase that lasted. How long did that last? 9 months?
Yeah, about.
Yeah, it was a long internship.
And then now I'm kind of redoing that agency, if you will, more content focused rather than advertising. But it's, like I said, it seems like a really natural evolution for me based on what I've been doing the past year and
yeah, I mean, just think about how much you've learned. It's just crazy. Yeah,
but also think about how good you've gotten at teaching me.
I guess so. I mean, being an entrepreneur kind of sucks. It takes a different breed to go at this stuff so persistently and consistently, and have the resilience that I look at you, Ben, and I'm like, damn, not that I wish that was my route, because I appreciate the route that I've been on, but you don't have kids, right? You don't have the house. You don't have all of these crazy expenses weighing you down. You're totally free to kind of go about your way, create this thing. And it's not that you have to be pushed into that defensive position because of a bunch of spending that you have, right? Or a bunch of obligations like I do.
No, that's true. And I mean, I see that with you in that you have this, well, you could call it overhead, but you have this pressure, and part of it you put on yourself.
Yeah.
But part of it is also there. And I think, just like many great entrepreneurs, I look up to you in that way, that you still get up in the morning, you still go. Most people would have never taken the leap. If they did, they would have already said, no, I'm going back. They would have just gone path of least resistance and gone back to what they know.
Well, and I wonder how many people take that route where it's like, okay, they taste what it's like on the outside and they're like, man, I had it pretty good, right? Like, I mean, I think statistically, I'm sure there's some astounding statistics that show how many people go off on their own and then they just give up. And to me, the magic lives in the optimization of both where is revenue coming from, but more importantly, what still lights you up.
Right.
And as I look at my life and really on a probably weekly basis, analyze those things, it helps dictate where I'm going. It helps dictate where I'm going. There we go. And so how do you do that while also staying on offense? And what I mean by staying on offense is how are you putting yourself financially into a position that you can continue to experiment while also not having these pressures on yourself? And I deliberately created essentially 2 years of offense for myself by leaving my old firm and creating enough runway that I wouldn't be pushed into that defensive. Now, here's what's interesting is that because I can't really delineate whether or not my motivation, whether or not my pressures are what motivates me or whether or not they're real pressures.
Right.
Right. And you hear it and you see it from me where I'm like, oh man, I gotta start making some real money here.
Right.
Otherwise I'm going to have to go find a real job.
Right.
Which doesn't seem all that unappealing at this point because I think of like the being able to sleep better and all that, but I also know I can't give up, right? I cannot give up. And it's also in this moment of high pressure that I'm able to analyze what's missing on the team, right? And you and I are a great dynamic duo, but detail is not our strength.
Yeah.
And I think as we look back on like this moment in particular, it's going to go down as where everything started to fall into place. And I go back to that amazing conversation I had with Mo. Mo always calls me whenever like I'm feeling really down for whatever reason. I think it's a God thing. And it was he that told me like, just keep going and then make sure that you're rocking your radius, right? What is that thing that you're going to your amazing network and friends that all want to help you, that you're asking them to do for you?
Right.
And I mean, this afternoon we'll have that thing, I think, now that we've brought in a yin to our yangs.
Right.
But yeah, man, it's been, hasn't been easy.
Absolutely. But you know what I find interesting is a year ago when you and I really got going and we started developing this relationship and I got an understanding of what you were doing, we recorded a video right there about the defining moment. And we talked afterwards and you were like, yeah, you know, with all this stuff happening, like it's getting crazy, like we're in a defining moment.
Yeah.
And we're still, I don't know if it's the same defining moment, but it's changed. But we like, this is the defining moment.
Yeah.
Right now, are the changes we're making now. That's it. And the other thing I will say is, regardless of what route you choose of security or risk and reward, whatever it is, you're going to look back and have really fond memories of this.
I know. Well, it's also, you can't untaste this freedom, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'll be honest with you here and say, if I had to go back to a regular one job, it would be very difficult because I can't untaste this obviously consistent passion, but consistent creation, right? And evolution and being able to dive into very different organizations and impact them in unique ways, but then also to take learnings from one and apply them to another.
Right.
And as my friend David Carowin told me on a mountain bike ride, he goes, Chris, you know what? Like, you're like a business polygamist. Right? He's like, you need like these multiple, and it's so true. But I do think that I will most certainly look back on these times as being amazing. And it's like having a baby, right? Like, you don't remember all of those sleepless nights and all that, but like, as you're going through it, I struggle in uncertainty, right? And I struggle in, even though I think a lot of people perceive me as being like, he's got it all figured out, he's jamming, and it's like, I'm in this crazy gray zone and truly don't know whether or not I'm going to pull this off. And that for me is my zone of weakness, and not knowing where I'm going, not having a plan is where I think most people struggle, to be honest.
Right. I think I have a question for you, but before I say that, I think it's really good that you recognize that that's your weakness.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people aren't that self-aware, and they'll take action or do something out of reaction to that weakness without recognizing, okay, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at patience. I'm not good at waiting, but I know like I need to right now. Or if you don't, then you take action. But I think you keep a cool head. And I have not once, even though you have kind of shiny object syndrome because you get really excited about stuff, I've not once seen you make an emotional decision out of desperation or anxiety or whatever it is. Every decision you've made
But you see me sitting here with tears rolling down my face.
And every decision you've made since then has been cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah.
That is something a lot of people can learn from. Now I have a question for you. You've told me a lot that kind of your vision is this world where the lines between work and life and friends and business and whatever, it all blurs, and it's like this big ball of yarn that intertwines. You kind of have that now, I would say, right? Like,
yeah, but I don't have the discipline to also charge along the way.
Okay.
Right? Like, I am the best salesperson for everyone other than myself. Unless I have that thing that I'm selling into. And I think that's been one of my biggest realizations in the last couple of weeks, is that I can add so much value so quickly in my areas of expertise, which are at this point pretty diversified, right? Sales and marketing, storytelling,
right,
building a personal brand, writing books, and then, having an amazing network. But because of we can dissect this, but I'm generally a people pleaser. I generally hate going to friends for help or for me, right? Like, I'm fine asking for help if I'm having a down day. But in the business sense, it's I'm still working on that muscle that, like, I got to charge for my time. Right. And I think as I transition into that, it's going to be way more fun.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can also talk about the psychology of the difference between charging for your time and the action that other person takes, and not charging for your time and the action that person takes.
Yeah.
Right. But, I'll also say that I remember in human development, my favorite professor, Brian Griffith, who actually helped me write The Millennial Whisperer with a lot of data and different things that he provided. But I remember in human development, there are 4 key stages of human development in life, right? As we all aspire for this kind of world of generativity where you're older, it's all about like instilling values in that next generation. And that's the 4th stage. But some people never even reach that 4th stage. And I remember critically in this, and this is like a 1000 class, right? Like, or 101. And he said that crisis catalyzes change. And it's usually a crisis that actually moves you from one to the next. And I think that is very much true with someone that my energy is insane, right? My passion is insane, right? And at the same time, I think it's also important for others to know that I struggle with the same things that they do. And that, I don't know if that always comes across, but it's actually in that struggle that I begin to finally see that clarity, right? Like, I mean, even 2 weeks ago when I was sitting here and I had tears rolling down my face, and Ben was over there edited a video awkwardly being like, I don't know what to do. I think I'm going to leave him alone. But I mean, I talk about that because that is actually where the most clarity comes from. Yeah. And like, even if you dissect it to like an athletic feat, right? Like pushing through that wall, or, on that, I've done some horrible marathons with horrible time, and, I've run them with Julie and she kicks my butt in every single one of them. But it always is really mile like 19, 20 that you want to totally give up, and you might be crying or you're just dying. And that's the most critical moment as you look back on a successful marathon. Success for me is just completing it. It's not like getting a 3-hour marathon. But, and I think that is something also that I'm very much proactively trying to bring into everything that I'm doing, is that like, I don't want to be a talking head, right? I don't want to be an inspirational, motivational guru. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
I want to change people, especially one-on-one, right? And I love doing speeches, and I love getting people fired up. But what I've learned is that it's just as important to talk about our struggles publicly as it is to talk about the triumphs.
Right.
And, I also know that in those down moments, and I think this is something everyone can just hopefully instill in them, is that it's absolutely critical that we sit in it for a little bit, but that we then reach out to people that we trust, that are much more practical to our emotional side, to confide in them and get their perspective. And I'm still a little bit digging out of that, right? Of kind of what, if you kind of trend line our ups and downs, I'm still kind of coming back out of that. But I certainly wouldn't be here with as much enthusiasm and excitement about where we're going with all this stuff had it not been for those phone calls and people that met up with me.
Right. Would you say that without the down moments, would you have made the same decisions to narrow your focus or double down on this or whatever it is that you're currently focusing on? Would you have come to that conclusion at all, or just as quickly, or
no?
You wouldn't have?
So basically, I took probably what would have been 6 months of learning, and I called it down to a week of going through that down moment and really practically figuring out what fires me up, what gives me energy, and what are some of these missing pieces. And what's interesting is that the further along that road you get without that down moment, and that's where we're looking in the mirror and we know something's off. Yeah. But we're like, oh man, I'm crushing it, right? And that ends up being a distraction in the grand scheme of things. And, I think for me, it's also, I don't necessarily have a destination outside of, I know it's going to look different than anything I've ever seen in terms of like structure and even a day in the life. And, innovation takes a lot of iteration. And so for me, my race is just really around making more money than I spend.
Right.
And I know I'm not there, and we're getting closer.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily have a destination, right? Like, which is kind of crazy given my makeup.
Well, and it's ever evolving, right? Like you have things you want, and you want your family to be doing well, but I'm sure your vision is ever evolving. You just said something interesting, or made me think of something interesting. In one of the podcasts, I forget maybe Bert, you said that instead of investing in anything else, you invested in the one thing you can control, and that's you.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting because there's so many people who are like, oh, invest in this, invest in that, no, new Shopify drop shipping strategy. But you kind of went to the core of what all of these people are selling, which is just like invest in yourself. Like buy my Shopify course, which is just investing in yourself. And you did all of that, but you went around the lies people tell themselves of like, oh, I'm starting a business, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm trying to make money. You just went straight to the core problem of like, I'm in a learning stage, I'm going to learn all of these things, and I'm investing in myself. Was that a conscious decision, or were you kind of just like, I want to do speaking, I want to pursue the stages, I want to pursue the teaching and the impact, and did the learning come with it, or did you deliberately kind of enter a learning stage when you first kind of went into this world of...
Well, this whole thing started as a side hustle, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, my first book was on a whim, and how I introduced myself on a retreat as the Millennial Whisperer. And so I never intended that to become my currency or my full-time gig. Mm-hmm. And then as I started to learn what it took to write a book and promote a book and then successfully create a speaking career out of it, mm-hmm. it's like, oh, I'm going to have a decision to make, mm-hmm. right? And that decision will be dictated by revenue. Mm-hmm. That's what I thought it would be.
Right.
But then what ended up happening was it was actually more spiritual in nature, right? Where
in the pool.
I was in the pool at Surf Ranch and with Grant Corrigan, the most inspirational, well-intentioned human being I've ever met, essentially in my dream moment of getting to Surf Ranch. Mm-hmm. And that was that catalyst. And, you know, even as I look at taking action right on our dreams and our aspirations and investing in ourselves, I've made a lot of bad investments. Mm-hmm. I've hired horrible PR firms, right? I've built bad websites that I've had to then rebuild. I've made so many mistakes that, like, I'm kind of an expert at how to pull this stuff together, you know?
I love that you just said that, because one of the many things I've learned from you is speed. And speed combined with action. And the result is failing fast.
Yeah.
And if you can get it out of the way, then you figure it out faster. And I just think that's so interesting because, especially now, my lovely girlfriend, Annika, I'm kind of pushing her to pursue her little side hustle, right? To kind of dump this unpursued passion into something to really grow that a little bit. And the first couple conversations we've had about it, I've noticed something in her that I had in myself, which is just like paralyzed from the mountain of what you're trying to create. And I took what you've taught me, and it's just like speed combined with action. You can fail faster and you can learn faster. And that's genuinely like, that's the simplest way I can put all of this. Anything that we do, anything that you've done, anything that I hopefully will do, it's simply pace combined with consistency and just taking action.
Yes. I mean, to a certain extent, I find fail fast a cliche. Mm-hmm. And it can be, in a lot of circumstances, irresponsible.
Okay.
Right? So, to me, it comes down to also being super deliberate about sequencing. Right. And I think so often we look at someone to our right or to our left of who we want to be, and we try to get there as fast as possible without sequencing them in the right orders.
Yeah, right.
And like even in the book world, I think everyone should write a book. It's a beautiful process. Now, don't expect anyone to buy that book or read it. Right. So manage your expectations, but it's such a beautiful, I think, expression of each of ourselves, and it forces you to learn something new, inside out and backwards, right? Yeah. Now, I will now tell people, do not write a book until you have a podcast first, right? There's a sequencing to this that you're going to actually figure out whether or not you want to write that thing, because you're going to be forced to record one of these a week. And then, but that's going to actually then inform what will end up being inside the book. And then the book's going to, so I think a lot of times you see the book and you see the stuff and you see the speakers and it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to start doing that. So you invest ahead of where you actually know your heart will be. Right. And so I think out of all the things that I would guess I've become somewhat of an expert in, it's that, right? And it's responsibly going after these things that can potentially become a new currency for ourselves, while investing in yourself, right? And I think so many people misinterpret what investing in yourself is, and they take it so literally, where, like my wife, Julie, you know, professional soccer player through and through. And then she went back to school to get these credentials to then get enough credits for undergraduate in biology. So then she could go and take a course, a master's course in training. And I'm like, Julie, you were like one of the top 10 athletes in the world. Skip those stuff. Like, you don't need any of that stuff. And so instead, right, it's, when I say invest in yourself, it's time. Like Julie, in Julie's case, right? Go interview people that are doing what you want to be and figure out their story arc. And then once you have enough of those, you're going to know which one of those you can try to parallel with your own life. Right. And so when people hear invest in yourself, they check the box by either taking a course or going on some retreat, and then there's no sustained changes in how they work. And so, you know, when I say invest in yourself, it's all of these things that I'm talking about, but it's also, you know, finding the right accountability partners, right, that are going to hold you accountable to this journey, but also act as a sounding board, etc. And so, yeah, I don't want anyone to misinterpret what I mean by that whole investing in yourself. Yeah. And then there's the whole fact that most people are not wired to be entrepreneurs, right? I mean, maybe 20% of the population are wired to be entrepreneurs, being that they have a high risk tolerance, right? They're fast paced, which is, I think, essential. And they know how to delegate and bring in the right yings to their weaknesses to then actually make stuff happen. Yeah. And so
what do you think is the right balance between stealing basis and identifying kind of, okay, this step is not necessary for me to pursue what I'm trying to pursue, especially in like the corporate world, which I don't know very well. I feel like it's very like structured and rigid. But what's the difference between cutting corners and stealing bases?
I think you learn that with time. And we live in a society right now that's instant everything, right? It's instant, you know, whether it be DoorDash, instant gratification. And the truth of the matter is you cannot short step. And I say this time and time again, the 3-year rule, that it's going to take you 3 years. You cannot shortcut that to actually putting in place those things within that side hustle or in that business or that thing that you're doing to see whether or not it's going to be successful. Right. So you better be passionate about it. Now, in terms of the stealing bases, the easiest bases to steal are any like education BS, right? I mean, look at you. You dropped out of college a year and a half ago. Yeah. And you can easily leave me and crush it at this point, right? And so when I look at stealing those bases, it's taking action and advocating for yourself. And unfortunately, and this comes to parenting, it comes with society, we expect those things to be given to us. And it's interesting, even as I coach some CEOs in this, right? You've got to, if you want to get to where you want to be, you're going to have to fight for it a little bit. Yeah. Right. And so nothing is given to you. Nothing. And And I think that's an important piece to this whole puzzle of where do you steal bases? And I'm not, stealing bases is very different than cutting corners. I'm not advocating to cut corners. Like, we're surrounded by these douchebag influencers everywhere that have all cut corners, that have no real expertise in what they're talking about, yet they have millions of followers. And that's where, like, there's this massive tension where it's like, all right, just you be you.
Yeah.
And make sure you have the right metrics in place for where it is that you want to go, and those checkpoints along the way to make sure that you're not getting off track. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at even our stuff, right? Like, everything takes way longer than most people expect.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Let's play the game. I think we've done this before. Where do you think we'll be a year from now?
Where are we a year from now? I have no idea. I mean, it's almost too far, right? And it's funny because you put that up against a lot of my friends that have much more normal jobs. They know exactly where they're going to be a year from now.
Right.
Ben, I have no idea where we're going to be a year from now, but I do know this, that I will be much more secure in my day-to-day life and the decisions that I'm making and pursuing. And once again, that's all part of the plan, right? Like, I look at everything in kind of 3-month tranches and hyper fixating on those goals within those next 3 months so that the ones after that can be what they need to be. And I'm also building this future that is very much choose your own adventure. And there's a lot of things I can't tell you whether or not they're going to be fulfilling and energizing. And who would have expected me working with one company, you know, in this case in Birmingham, Alabama, would feel so rewarding and fun. Right. Like, a year ago, I would have been like, no way I'm going to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So from a year from now, I can generally tell you what that's going to look like, right? Which is that I basically am working for a portfolio of people and companies and going wide and deep with those individuals to have a much greater impact through them versus me being the impactor. Right. And that's the impact multiplier where it took some time to figure it out that I'm actually going to have a way bigger impact by helping people with their own message and then helping them package that and also inspire their people and all those things that I've gotten pretty good at. That's way better for me than having to just be the guy standing on a stage doing it himself.
Right.
And thank God I figured that out, because if I had just gone after being the impactor, I know that future for myself would be shallow and unfulfilling.
Yeah. You won't have an answer for this, but it's more of a statement than a question. A lot of my generation and even just younger people, you could say misguided, but that's subjective, but they're idealizing and dreaming into such like superficial things. You're like content creator, or like, and if you're creative, that's great, but if you just want to be an influencer, like, how did we get to this point that those people are the idols? Like the girls that just dance on camera and do nothing else, and they make millions of dollars. Like, how have we gotten here as a society that like groundbreaking and disrupting educational content is less successful than a 10-second clip of some girl talking to the camera with makeup on or revealing outfit or whatever? So
this is where like the test of time comes through. And once again, we're still in such an early stage of this like influencer economy that watch what happens in 4 years from now with all those people. And we've seen it with childhood stars, right? Like how many childhood stars end up going down this like drug or, you know, when you have that sort of success that is so egocentric, the heart suffers, right? And so at some point with just human development, those people that think they have it all will quickly realize how they don't.
Yeah.
And listen, like to each their own. Like I think the world we live in is so beautiful in that anyone can actually create a company out of their passions, right? Mm-hmm. And what I tell most people is that if it seems too good to be true, it usually is.
Yeah.
And I would say the same thing for these influencers that might be crushing it, but let's see what happens for 10 years from now. Like use it as a foundation to then actually pursue something that hopefully pushes you to develop and challenges you, right? Because I do believe that it is the journey that is most fulfilling and less of all of these kind of what I would call champagne moments, right? And it's actually with that journey and those challenges that the greatest fulfillment comes. And sure, like I could run a mile every day at a 10-minute pace, but I don't, right? Mm-hmm. I freaking hate going to the gym. I hate it, but I do it every Monday, Wednesday, Friday with my trainer and a group of and 3 guys. And like, it is my least favorite hour of the week, but it is by far what sets me above and beyond on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm in flow space all day long. Right. Like today, like I'm like, dude, we're recording a podcast. I'm going to the gym at 5. Let's freaking go. Right. So once again, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen to those people, but it's certainly not something that I think we should all aspire for. And I see it in my daughters who are 12 and 14. Right. Yeah. But let's see what happens.
I have a different question for you.
Yes, let's hear it.
This is going really all over the place, but
it's good.
Why do we do things that we don't want to do?
Put it into tactics.
Okay. To me, there's 2 kind of facets to this. One, like you going to the gym or me going in the cold plunge or whatever, some eating healthy. That's one area. And then the other area is like going to a job you hate, going to school you hate, you know, like billions of people do things they don't like. Why?
Well, I think both of those categories are very different, right?
Agreed.
Like, so the first one, I think making yourself uncomfortable is super important. We have the most ridiculously blessed lives, right? Yeah. Like right now there are people getting bombed in other parts of the world, right? And I mean, it's straight up survival.
Right.
I mean, and this goes back, I mean, you can look at happiness index and all the studies. It's not, we almost have it too good, right? That's the problem. We have it too good. Yeah. And a lot of us, and then a lot of us, there's a handful that don't.
Right.
And so it's up to the ones that have it too good to help the ones that don't.
Right.
Right? Instead of just talking about it.
Yeah.
And that stuff drives me crazy. So, I mean, like the cold plunge, the going to the gym, like that is solely like health, right? Mm-hmm. Like just, it sucks having to eat healthy, right? But like that's a totally different category than going to a job every single day that you hate because you're scared about what the alternative looks like. Now, there are times in everyone's job that it sucks.
Yeah.
Right. And why side hustles to me are so important, Ben, is that each of us can responsibly practice something that challenges us in a new domain without having to leave our job.
Yeah.
Most people should not quit their job and go after whatever that thing is. Right. So until we actually practice enough of that and we have the right metrics in place to say, okay, now's the time. Once again, I irresponsibly did it in more of a spiritual moment or whatever, however you want to interpret that. But I think we need to be less dependent on our sole job that pays us money,
right,
to find all of our fulfillment. And even in this journey that I'm on now, right, where I've essentially created all of my own stuff, my job is all of these things. I have some that end up having, those plateaus, and it's like, oh my gosh, right? But I use the other things I have to help power through and create that momentum that I think is necessary to wake up fired up.
Right. Still relating to this social media thing, why? No, not so much why, but I think if society or if people made more of an effort to express interest in or show their passion for not a normal life, but like glorifying other things other than just the entrepreneur, like I made $1 million in my 20s and now I'm moving to Miami, like that kind of lifestyle. I feel like that's so overly glorified that other things, it's not really like that.
Yeah, and most people are full of crap too, right?
Right. And B, there's so many other things out there, but I feel like people don't even really know how much opportunity there is for not just entrepreneurs, but for anybody, whether it's you like plants or you want to write a book or you want to work in manufacturing, whatever it is, like there's so much opportunity. But what you see every day with we're all on social media, so we all see this stuff. None of it is really diverse. It's all pretty like,
because you've got puppeteers and you've got puppets, and everyone's a puppet for the most part, right? Like being a puppeteer, we're in that you're coming up with innovative thinking. I mean, obviously we all borrow from different things, right? In different relationships and conversations. Yeah. But to then put that into something of your own, it's hard.
Right.
And as any artist can attest to, especially ones that have created their own style, it's so much harder.
Yeah.
And I don't think we glorify enough of those types of stories. But I also go back, Ben, to why most people are miserable in their day-to-day jobs is that they're in the wrong job to begin with.
Right.
11% of people are actually in jobs that match their personality profile. If we can just fix that, we're going to have a lot happier of a society. And I think it goes way younger than that, right? Even in, should I go to college or should I not go to college? What type of college should I go to? Should I consider going to a trade school because I want to be working with my hands? And why are we not using psychological data and some of these things that we all have access to dictate some of that decision making versus doing what will look best on social media or when you're with your friends? I work for a movie studio or whatever it is, right? Like, and that's what's been so astounding to me is that the happiest workers that I've found are the ones you've never even heard of their company, right? And there's not bureaucracy, and they can be who they want to be and show up authentically every single day, and also have the freedom to pursue these things on the side without the hammer coming down.
Do you think those values of like that the older generation who was more connected, right? You would say that the older generation had more of this like sense of community and sense of connection. Would you say that's correct?
Correct.
Do you think that those values, along with technology, with the impact of technology, are those values not getting passed down as much as they should? Or do you think it's the fact that technology is prohibiting us from really adopting the values?
I think that the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? And in anything, as a society, we do this, right? Like we We go like way too far to like we're reactive to whatever's happening. And, you know, my argument against the boomers of the world would be like, no, I don't believe in showing up for a job for 25 years and stamping that clock because that's your duty so you can get the watch. And like, no, I absolutely disagree with that mentality.
Right.
Because it's going to take 5 jobs to figure out what it is you actually like, right? Once you're in that job, I do, you got to stamp that clock for a little bit, right? But I think there's so much responsibility on the leadership side that is going unfulfilled that we tend to look at this stuff as a society and say it's their fault or their fault. Like, we're all suffering from poor leadership out there.
Yeah.
And that's what's exciting for me and what I'm doing with Work Vibes, right? Where we could diagnostically go in to a company and say, here are the 3 things as an organization that you need to double down on that cost almost $0 to implement. And then here are all of the leadership deficits and also strengths. And here's how we rectify that. And so not like, and that's a blatant sell into Work Vibes, but I'm totally fine with it because I built it to built it with an amazing team. Next to me with Christy and Kevin, but we built that to alleviate this one thing, right? And so, Ben, I think it's easy to like point fingers, right? And say, and it's just like, all right, let's not point fingers, right? Let's just do something different. Let's disrupt a little bit. That as you look at that on a piece of paper, it's like, yeah, that makes total sense, right? Like, so, yeah, I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I see all of that as opportunity. You asked me what I was going to be doing a year from now. Like, I do, like, now I'm getting all fired up and I'm feeling optimistic. We're going to be crushing it, right? Yeah. Like, in having an impact in a scalable way that right now I don't know what that looks like yet. But I look at my life as a massive roulette table, right? Okay. And I love playing roulette. 22 is my favorite number. And I would probably have an addiction issue with gambling, so I hold restraint there, and I don't do it because I know what I would become. And you know this very well. Now that it's the same reason I don't drink anymore, but I would put a stack on Black 22. And do you know how many times that hit? Like maybe once in like the 10 times I've done it, right? And it was really fun. But I now know better that in the roulette table, I need every single thing. I need every number covered. I need black. I need red. I need the greens, those little doozies of the 0 and the 00, right? I need every single thing covered. Yeah. And I've been very deliberate in building out this roulette table over the last really 5 years so that every number is covered. And now I'm making some directional pieces of where I'm focusing my time and energy. But generally, I'm like, all right, I don't know when that ball is going to drop. But when it does, it might even hit a couple of those, right?
Yeah, right.
And so I don't think people necessarily look at their lives that way. I think they put all their chips on one number and then it doesn't hit and they give up. And then they live this life where they're doing things that they hate. And on their deathbed, they're like, man, I wish I had just done that one thing, right? Like, I wish I had just gone for it. And I wish I'd just written that book. I wish I'd just, made up with that friend that I had a falling out with. I wish I'd, all of those regrets, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not a very big regret guy. I think you've probably seen that. Like, I'm really good at just jamming forward, cleaning up in real time and going. Yeah. And I think the same is true in our businesses.
I think if anybody's going to take anything away from this, that should be it. Just focus on what you can control and don't live to regret. Just move on.
Well, and be honest with yourself with what do you really enjoy, right? And if there's nothing that you really enjoy, there's probably some cleanup necessary, right? And my specialty is not broken humans, right? I think I can be a nice little dose for them, broken humans, and we're talking about like the 0 to 3, right? Like going through a horrible crisis.
Yeah.
I'm not great with 0 to 3s, right? So I would argue that if you are listening and you're going through a lot of that downward spiral, it's time to find an expert to help us bring you out of it. A therapist, a psychiatrist, like go and do the work, right? I mean, I now talk about from stage how I checked myself into a rehab on the middle of a vacation to a mental facility for 5 weeks, right? It was my hell. This is, 2016. But that was a necessary part of my journey and story that I was able to pretty efficiently do, that kind of take me from what was like probably a 1 to a 3. And then the magic started to happen as I climbed out of that.
Yeah.
And so go seek that help. And then for those that are in like the 3 to 4, right? They're like, oh, it's just kind of, my life is uninspired. Like, go do something about it. Go start experimenting, right?
Yeah.
And my favorite exercise is write on a piece of paper all those things that people go to you for advice. And it should be at least 20 things. And, for me, it's big green egg recipes, and it's how to write a book, and it's being the father of young daughters. It's cool places to get away in the Caribbean, to learn how to kiteboard, right? It's all these things, right? So come up with that list. And then once you have that list together, find the one that, if I challenge you to record a podcast around for a full year, once a week, which one of those are you passionate enough to have the tenacity to follow it all the way through? That's what's going to actually dictate some of these things that can be your future.
Right.
Just don't do the same thing every single day. And a lot of these things are uncomfortable, right? But just take action.
That's the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again.
I've heard that.
And expecting a different result.
I've heard that.
So
I've heard that. Well, and I think so many of us, we wait for others to do it for us, right?
Yeah.
And the truth is, and I've learned this, like through most of the low moments that we've had, like when I'm 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago and I'm sitting here with tears rolling down my face, that's what it takes, right? And if you can't handle that, then keep doing what you're doing, right? But don't keep doing what you're doing. Go get yourself to a place that you can't do that. Right. And for some, it's going to take medication, and for others, it's going to take a lot of therapy. But go clean that up and try to be efficient about it. Don't get stuck in it.
Yeah.
I think people get stuck at 3s, right? Then the magic happens when you start taking action.
Yeah.
And I wrote a post on LinkedIn the other day that, if you're in one of those kind of downward moments, take something that you're passionate about and just go give back in that domain of what you're passionate about, right? People need help. It's our responsibility of humans to bring those others up with us, and go do that, right? But take action.
Yeah.
And that, to your original point, action is not tough for me, and I can make decisions very quickly.
Yeah.
Almost to my Julie would say, I pivot too quickly sometimes, and that's also true.
Yeah.
Right.